I was sitting across from a friend at a coffee shop yesterday, and I watched something really disturbing happen in real time. He pulled out his phone, and he was just intending to check a simple article on heart health, something totally benign. But within, I don't know, seconds, the dynamic just shifted. I watched his eyes glaze over and his thumb start that rhythmic, almost hypnotic scrolling motion. His expression went from, curious to annoyed and then to visibly agitated.
Wow.
He stayed like that for 20, maybe 30 minutes. He didn't say a word. He just sat there feeding on the stream of content that the algorithm was force-feeding him. When he finally looked up, he looked physically exhausted, almost like he was waking up from a bad trance.
Yeah.
He rubbed his face and said, wait, what was I even looking for? He had completely forgotten his original goal. He opened his phone to get healthier, but the system hijacked him with a political rage bait story disguised as urgent news, leaving him anxious and, in his words, pissed off instead of informed.
That is such a common experience.
That moment of snapping out of it, staring at a black screen, irritated, unable to recall what you intended to accomplish, that isn't a personal failure. It's the result of a weaponized business model. It made me realize that what we call media today isn't journalism or culture anymore. It's industrial-scale attention extraction designed to make us sick. But what if I told you that beneath this layer of algorithmic sludge, a quiet renaissance is already happening?
That experience you describe is, it's profoundly common, and it's the perfect visceral lens to look at the core crisis we're all facing.
Yeah.
It's not about poor impulse control.
No.
It's about a finely tuned machine that has found the, let's call them weaknesses in human psychology. The system we currently rely on for information, these massive digital platforms driven by engagement metrics, is, by its fundamental design, actually hostile to human flourishing.
Hostile. That's a strong word, but it feels right.
It is. It's not optimized to deliver truth or nuance. Its one and only mandate is to maximize, and that's our mission in this deep dive. That's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to unpack the mechanics of this weaponized business model, drawing on some recent research to show how artificial intelligence and advertising incentives are actively driving political and social polarization.
Okay.
And then crucially, we pivot to hope. We're going to explore these concrete examples of how decentralized media is building a completely new infrastructure, one that serves human curiosity and intellectual depth instead of corporate exploitation. We are basically looking for the blueprints of a healthier information economy.
So let's start with the engine itself, the AI mandate. We're not talking about a few unfortunate consequences here. We're talking about business models that have, as a side effect, intended or not fundamentally destabilized democratic political systems.
Right. The research is really clear on this. AI tools and the digital business models they support are now being identified as critical systemic drivers of polarization. And this affects both voters and the political parties that are supposed to represent them.
And the scale of this is, it's just hard to get your head around.
It's almost impossible to grasp. To really appreciate the power dynamic here, you have to look at the contextual data. Over 50% of Americans now get at least some of their news from social media.
Half.
At least half. And when you factor in everything else, communication, entertainment, just scrolling, the average American is estimated to spend anywhere from 2 to 8 hours a day on these platforms.
That is a massive, continuous exposure window.
Immense. It grants these platforms this huge, subtle power to shape political attitudes, cognitive processes, our very emotional states.
And that time is currency. And the algorithms are designed to spend that currency very, very efficiently, at least for the platform's bottom line. These mechanisms seem to operate through two main interconnected channels that just feed each other.
That's right.
So let's tackle the first one, the social media channel, which is, I guess, what you could call the filter bubble factory.
It's a perfect name for it. This channel is driven entirely by one overriding objective: engagement. The AI is engineered to maximize how long you stay on the platform, period. To do that, the recommendation systems diligently build those personalized informational silos we call filter bubbles or echo chambers.
Right.
And the core function of these bubbles is simple. It's efficient. They minimize your exposure to any content that might challenge your existing beliefs, what researchers call counter-attitudinal content. The logic is that familiarity and reinforcement keep you comfortable, predictable, and most importantly,
Scrolling.
But
wait, minimizing discomfort, that almost sounds like good customer service. So how does that, minimizing discomfort turn into intense political polarization?
This is where the empirical findings get really subtle and honestly surprising. It creates polarization primarily among the most extremist viewers.
Not the moderates.
Not really. Here's the critical finding from the modeling. The social media experience makes these already highly ideological voters more polarized and more certain of their views. However, and this is crucial, moderate voters often retain identical or nearly identical political beliefs even after being on social media.
That is a fascinating nuance. So the platform isn't turning moderate people into raving extremists. It's taking people who are already on the ideological edges and just throwing gasoline on that fire, making them more fervent and less compromising.
Precisely. For the moderate voter, the occasional counter-attitudinal message they see gets canceled out by opposing messages, or they just learn to ignore low-quality stuff as noise.
Okay.
But the highly polarized ideological user is fed this relentless, uninterrupted diet of only congruent, reinforcing content inside their bubble. And this intensified polarization of that highly engaged base then creates immense political pressure.
So the political parties feel that pressure.
They do. They then shift their policy positions further towards the extremes in order to cater to and keep that newly energized extremist core that the platform has helped to build and amplify.
That perfectly explains why the political center feels so hollowed out, even if most individual voters are still moderate. The party platforms themselves are being dragged to the edges by the loudest, most engaged, and algorithmically amplified minority online.
It's a direct feedback loop between the platform and the political incentive structure.
A closed system.
It is. And here's where it gets really interesting. When you look at the quality of the content that's used to do this, research shows this effect isn't uniform. This polarization effect is most intensive when the content reliability is, well, middling.
Middling, so not the completely unhinged fake news and not the perfectly sourced, peer-reviewed study.
Exactly. Think about the extremes. When reliability is very high, opposing high reliability messages tend to cancel each other out. That limits the filter bubble.
Makes sense.
And if the content is extremely low reliability, obvious misinformation, junk science, it really only impacts the most ideologically extreme users who have already decided not to use critical filters.
So the sweet spot for polarization is in the middle?
The sweet spot is that middling reliability content. That's the content that has just enough plausible uncertainty about whether it's true or not to thrive in an echo chamber. It has just enough credibility to fuel the extremist narrative without immediately falling apart under scrutiny.
It weaponizes uncertainty.
It allows the filter bubble to intensify polarization, because there's just enough ambiguity online to stop users from ever encountering a unified, undeniable shared reality. And unfortunately, this middling reliability regime is a pretty accurate description of our current information environment. The system weaponizes uncertainty to maximize profit.
That's a powerful conclusion. Okay, let's unpack the second mechanism now, which connects the AI directly to money and political targeting, the digital ads channel. This relies on the AI's ability to target specific voters with customized messages, often with incorrect information.
Right, and this mechanism depends entirely on the AI's ability to categorize and target users based on their cognitive resistance, especially those we might call vulnerable. Users are essentially categorized as either sophisticated or naive.
Okay, what's the difference?
Sophisticated users have the correct model of the world. They understand the political process. They know that digital ads, especially political ones, are paid for persuasion. They know they contain little to no real information.
So they see an ad and they're skeptical.
They're very skeptical. They don't update their foundational beliefs based on a political ad.
And the naive users, the susceptible ones, how does the AI even identify them?
The AI identifies them through their behavioral data, their click patterns, their engagement history with low-quality content, their willingness to share things without checking. Naive users are those who believe that political ads contain genuine, informative signals about the world.
Or they just don't have the tools to tell the difference.
Exactly. Because they have this inherent trust or lack the critical tools to filter it, they are significantly easier to convince, even with incorrect or misleading information.
So the platform sells the political parties access to the easiest people to influence. And this creates a massive incentive flip for the parties.
A huge incentive flip, because this ability to efficiently influence susceptible voters, the naive users, is what makes digital political ads so attractive and so potent. Since parties can now target these users with extreme efficiency, they have less reason to appeal to the sensible middle ground or to moderate their platforms.
Why bother trying to convince a skeptic?
Right. Why compromise to win over a few sophisticated skeptical voters when you can pour all your resources into reaching this highly malleable, naive audience you've already identified? It directly reinforces the polarization cycle we were just talking about.
But is this choice of monetization, digital ads, is that a permanent structural feature, or does it depend on the political climate?
The theoretical models on this are fascinating. They reveal that this choice is entirely dependent on the political landscape. When two parties are locked in an intense neck-and-neck competition.
Like we see in many places now.
Exactly. In that high-stakes race, monetization via digital ads is more profitable for the platform. Competition means massive, rapid, high-volume ad spending designed to swing that narrow middle. And this reliance on ads then drives the parties toward greater polarization to maximize their persuasive effect on the naive users, which in turn increases the platform's profit in a continuous loop.
That is a stunning finding. It means the platform's profit-maximizing behavior is structurally linked to making political division worse, but only under certain conditions.
Now, flip that scenario. If one political party is dominant and there's less intense competition, the platform's profit-maximizing model shifts.
How so?
In a dominant party scenario, the benefit political parties get from targeting digital ads is just not enough to compensate the platform for the loss of entertainment utility the users feel from all the ad clutter.
So people get annoyed and leave?
Precisely. In that more stable environment, the platform actually gravitates toward a subscription-based model to keep its users. And crucially, in the subscription model, the polarizing forces we just detailed, the need to target naive users and drive emotional engagement, they just disappear. This proves the business model isn't neutral. It interacts dynamically with political competition to generate polarization.
That analysis paints an incredibly bleak, structurally determined picture of the centralized, ad-driven world. It's a self-perpetuating machine designed to keep us polarized and distracted so our attention can be monetized. But this is exactly where that quiet renaissance comes in, this counter-movement that is building an entirely different infrastructure based on totally different economic incentives.
Yes.
Let's start with the fundamental flaw in the old model that this new movement is trying to correct.
The core problem is the incentive structure of the ad model. Traditional media and then, catastrophically digital platforms learned that the human brain has this industrial-scale exploitable flaw. Our threat detection systems.
Fear, anger, anxiety.
Fear, anger, anxiety, tribalism. These emotional states reliably activate and keep eyes on screens. They keep us checking, scrolling, clicking, because our brains are wired to find out what the next threat is or who is currently threatening our tribe.
We are hardwired to pay attention to danger, whether it's real or manufactured. The ad model just figured out how to ring that ancient alarm bell over and over.
All day long. And the content's truth, or its long-term impact on your mental or civic health, is entirely secondary. The content is just a cheap, effective delivery mechanism for those eyes, which are then sold as a data stream to advertisers. This is industrial-scale attention extraction, designed to hijack our psychology.
And the decentralized renaissance is an active attempt to sever that fundamentally unhealthy relationship by changing the economic engine.
Exactly.
And the most profound break seems to come from that economic shift, the move from advertising to a patronage model. Let's talk about what that patronage model allows for creators, maybe using the example of Marcus, the science journalist.
The story of Marcus illustrates this economic flip perfectly. Marcus was a brilliant science journalist at a major digital publication. He had done this deep, meticulous 7,000-word analysis on the global supply chain for rare earth minerals.
Wow.
And his editor killed it, just killed it. Why? Because the complicated, boring truth wouldn't click. His editors wanted him to write a listicle called 10 Things You Didn't Know Were Killing Your Pets.
Of course they did.
Because that content serviced the advertiser, selling space for pet insurance, and boutique dog food.
He was trapped in the loop, focused on stealing 5 seconds of attention from a million distracted people just to hit a page view quota for ad revenue.
But the moment he switched to a subscription-based patronage platform, that entire incentive structure just vanished. He started charging a direct monthly fee asking readers to invest in his work, not just consume free content. And he quickly discovered that 2,000 people, not a million, just 2,000 focused minds were desperate for the complexity he used to be forced to cut out.
He achieved what you called the freedom to be boring.
The freedom to be boring. His most successful piece, the one that generated the most intense and civil discussion among his subscribers, was a 10,000-word essay on grid storage batteries.
10,000 words on grid storage batteries. I cannot stress enough how impossible that content would be in the ad-based world where every single word has to fight for a click or it's an economic failure.
The whole system changes. Under the patronage model, the creator's loyalty is with the truth and the intellect of their paying audience, not the demands of the ad department or the algorithm's need for rage. The reader is no longer a product to be sold. They are an investor in knowledge.
And that shift drives a real intellectual meritocracy. It rewards depth and substance over sensationalism.
The conversation is better because the economics reward clarity, not chaos.
This shift toward intellectual depth is also rebuilding one of the things the ad model systematically destroyed: trust. The ad model operates at scale through these centralized, distant, often sensationalizing institutions. The decentralized model seems to build trust peer-to-peer. This takes us to the case of Elias, the structural engineer in Ohio.
The problem in places like the post-industrial town in Ohio where Elias lived was that trust in external institutions, especially media and government, had completely evaporated. People felt legacy media just parachuted in cherry-picked quotes to fit a polarized national narrative and then left.
So they just assumed everything on the screen was a monetized lie designed to manipulate them.
Exactly. And that distrust created fertile ground for polarization.
So what did Elias, a retired structural engineer, do differently to rebuild that ground-level trust?
He bypassed the sensationalism and polarization entirely by going hyper-local and hyper-factual. He didn't start a political opinion platform. He started a newsletter dedicated to verifiable, local, often boring facts. Digitizing complex local zoning maps, explaining the structural integrity reports of local bridges, and attending every single city council meeting to provide raw, transcribed minutes. He wasn't giving an opinion. He was offering a shared, transparent, foundational reality that everyone could agree on.
And that shared reality created a community, an epistemic community outside of the centralized, polarized media structure.
Absolutely. Neighbors who previously disliked each other's politics, maybe one was highly liberal, the other highly conservative, they began subscribing to Elias because he provided that common, undeniable layer of local fact. They might disagree on what to do about the crumbling bridge, but they no longer argued about whether the bridge was structurally sound.
They rebuilt their social trust horizontally, peer-to-peer.
Right, often engaging in civil discussions in the comment sections of a newsletter about the town's water main replacement schedule. This shows that genuine trust isn't granted vertically by large corporate entities. It's built horizontally through a shared, transparent commitment to local reality.
That focus on local, authentic reality also seems to be our strongest defense against ideological subversion, particularly from foreign actors. When the content is too rooted in nuance, it's hard for a bot farm to replicate.
Yes, and this connects perfectly to the story of Sarah, the veteran in the Pacific Northwest.
Okay.
Sarah's experience highlights this growing threat of what's called synthetic discord. Her local online groups were being swamped with sensationalized, divisive, algorithmically amplified content, often generated by sophisticated foreign state entities trying to destabilize social cohesion by exploiting existing fractures in society.
And the purpose of this information warfare is always the same.
It's always the same. Destroy trust. Trust in government, institutions, and eventually trust between neighbors.
And Sarah, instead of getting into arguments with the bots, chose a totally different, more resilient path.
Her response was a strategic act of cultural resilience, and she did it through decentralized media. She created a hyper-local American resilience podcast. She interviewed local business owners, teachers, farmers about authentic, culturally specific struggles and victories, the kinds of challenges only people who live there would understand.
So the content was so nuanced, so specific.
So rooted in specific lived experience, local dialect, and community memory that foreign content farms simply couldn't replicate it effectively. The attempts by the bots to engage with this highly specific human content were immediately obvious and just failed.
So authenticity becomes the firebreak against the weaponized lies and synthetic discord.
That's it. The defense against information warfare isn't primarily censorship. It's cultural density and depth. Content that is deeply rooted in local nuance and genuine human experience provides kind of psychological immunity.
Right.
When a fake, manufactured narrative about a local issue tried to sweep through her listeners, they collectively rejected it because they were already grounded in a robust, truthful, human-centric local culture established by her work. This shows that the decentralized, creator-driven ecosystem is not just a niche alternative, it's a strategic defense mechanism against external subversion.
So we've established that the ad model drives polarization and attention extraction. But when these centralized platforms have to deal with the toxic content they help create and amplify, the moderation strategies they use are also driven entirely by their core business model. Let's look at content moderation not as a moral imperative, but as a strategic marketing tool to maximize revenue.
That is the crucial framing, especially when you're analyzing the behavior of these massive platforms. A platform uses content moderation to maximize its revenue by strategically positioning itself, either as a moderate platform for a broad audience or an extreme one for a highly engaged niche.
It's a balancing act.
It's a continuous balancing act. Prune the extreme, controversial content and risk losing some highly engaged users, but potentially gain new users who prefer a more moderate, brand-safe environment. The revenue model dictates where that profitable balance point lies.
Okay, let's contrast the two main strategies, starting with the big advertising platforms like Facebook or Twitter, which rely on volume.
Advertising platforms are structurally more likely to conduct content moderation. Their goal is volume to maximize their overall user base for ad revenue. They use moderation strategically to prune controversial content and attract a broader, less extreme pool of users.
Which is more attractive to mainstream advertisers.
Exactly. More attractive to corporate advertisers looking for a brand-safe environment. Their moderation policies are geared toward user base expansion, not necessarily moral clarity.
Now contrast that with subscription platforms like the decentralized newsletters we just discussed. They rely on depth, not breadth.
Subscription platforms are structurally less likely to moderate content, and the reason is built into the economic model itself. The subscription fee acts as a screen. It effectively screens out the less extreme, casual users. The remaining paying user base tends to be more ideological and highly invested, and is often less bothered by the presence of extreme content. Sometimes they're actively seeking it. Moderation, in this case, is just less effective as a tool for attracting new users when a price barrier already exists.
So ad platforms moderate to get more people. Subscription platforms moderate less because they already have the right kind of people. But the research suggests that when a subscription platform does moderate, it does so more aggressively. That seems completely counterintuitive.
It's an economic paradox, but is rooted in their ability to internalize the benefits.
Yeah.
An advertising platform gains users by moderating, but it can't easily internalize the full financial benefit of a cleaner or safer environment. Advertisers pay based on volume and views, not content purity.
Okay.
A subscription platform, however, can internalize that benefit through pricing. A cleaner, higher quality, less chaotic content environment means a higher willingness to pay from the remaining invested user base. That lets the platform charge a higher subscription fee.
So if they decide to clean house, they do it aggressively because they can charge more for a premium experience.
Precisely. They can reap the direct, quantifiable financial reward through elevated prices.
This also deeply affects the incentive to actually invest in the technology to do moderation well. We know the AI tools used for this are often imperfect.
This is a major structural insight. A subscription-based platform always has a strong economic incentive to perfect its content moderation technology. If the technology is perfect, they can precisely prune only the content that drives people away, raise their price to reflect the higher quality, and internalize the entire benefit. They always profit from better, more accurate moderation.
But the advertising platforms, the biggest ones, they don't always have that incentive. That is deeply unsettling. Why would they ever prefer imperfect technology?
Because content moderation is extremely costly, both in terms of staff and advanced AI development. And if imperfect technology accidentally fails to remove some highly engaging but extreme users, well, those users contribute immense engagement metrics, the very fuel sold to advertisers.
Oh, wow.
The platform might lose some moderate users because of the imperfect moderation, but the high cost of perfecting the technology, combined with the profitability of the remaining extreme high engagement users, means the maximum profit point for an ad platform might actually sit at a point of imperfect technological accuracy.
So perfect moderation is simply not necessary, and sometimes even counterproductive for maximum ad revenue.
That's right. So the subscription model encourages better technology for a better user experience, whereas the advertising model can actually be more profitable when the technology is flawed and divisive. It's a horrifying structural problem.
It's a critical market failure. Okay, finally, we need to consider this hypothetical social planner, this benevolent entity trying to maximize overall social welfare, not platform profit. The
Right.
research shows that a self-interested platform, whether it's ad or subscription-based, is more likely to conduct content moderation than what this social planner would choose.
Yes.
Wait, you're saying both profit-driven systems over-moderate compared to the social good. Why would a social planner be more relaxed?
The difference lies in the metric they're optimizing for. The social planner is focused strictly on pruning users whose content contributes negative social utility. Think verifiable, direct harm. Inciting violence, disseminating dangerous public health misinformation, coordinated harassment,
The really bad stuff.
the really bad stuff. The planner ignores content that is merely controversial or potentially offensive, but contributes to legitimate, though uncomfortable, political discourse.
And the platforms.
Platforms, ad or subscription are focused on pruning users who don't maximize platform profit. This metric includes minimizing bad press, maintaining brand safety for advertisers, and reducing the risk of boycotts. Because platforms internalize the financial cost of public controversy, they are far more likely to prune controversial content, even if it's socially beneficial or constitutionally protected, than the social planner would.
Because the social planner doesn't have a bottom line concerned with PR or ad contracts.
Exactly. The social planner's optimal strategy is to adopt a more relaxed standard than the subscription model, but a stricter standard than the ad model, focusing strictly on verifiable social harm.
We've broken down the mechanisms and the incentives that drive this environment of attention, extraction, and polarization, showing that the economic model is really the root cause. Now let's talk about solutions and mitigation. We are facing coordinated ideological subversion, often led by foreign entities, that exploits the very infrastructure designed for engagement.
The fight against foreign-led information warfare requires what's often called a whole-of-society effort. We have to recognize the fundamental purpose of this subversion. It's not to convert you to another ideology. It is simply to destroy trust.
Right.
Trust in government, trust in institutions, and most importantly, trust between citizens. It does this by exploiting the existing societal fractures that the AI has amplified. So mitigation strategies must promote critical thinking and individual responsibility as the primary line of defense. The citizen is the final crucial arbiter of what information gets accepted and shared.
So what strategic interventions can governments and regulators make to nudge the system away from that structurally polarizing ad model and toward a healthier structure, reflecting the decentralized renaissance we discussed?
There are several policy levers identified in the research, starting with targeting the core financial driver: digital ad taxes. Taxes on digital ad revenue can effectively push platforms towards subscription-based models. Since we established that the digital ad model is the core driver of polarization when political parties are competitive, this tax just limits those polarizing effects by making subscription models comparatively more attractive for the platform.
So you're intervening at the level of the business model itself. What about interventions targeting the content flow to break up those dangerous filter bubbles?
We can implement diversification standards. This means regulating platforms to ensure they expose users to counter-attitudinal content, deliberately limiting the creation of those tight, self-reinforcing bubbles. The idea is to mandate some exposure to diverse viewpoints.
But that sounds tricky.
It has to be approached with extreme caution. Research suggests that if this forced exposure is excessive or poorly implemented, it can sometimes lead to a backfire effect, users doubling down on their original beliefs, feeling attacked, and actually increasing their polarization. It's a very difficult tightrope walk.
And what about addressing the problem of the naive user being so easily swayed by targeted political ads?
Transparency and education are key there. Regulations focused on increasing digital ad transparency, forcing disclosure of who paid for the ad, how it was targeted, who is seeing it. That, combined with increased digital literacy campaigns, can effectively reduce the fraction of naive users.
Yeah.
The more knowledgeable you are about how ads are targeted and what their true, low informative value is, the less persuasive they become.
It makes the sophisticated user model the default.
That's the goal.
And finally, for the platforms themselves, what is their responsibility regarding false or misleading content? Should they just engage in wide-scale censorship?
The analysis strongly suggests that providers and social media outlets should visibly label false or misleading stories and clearly identify the source and the funding behind them. The goal is to enable consumer critical thinking and responsible sharing, not to engage in blanket censorship, which just creates endless constitutional and political controversies. Providing context and source identification arms you, the citizen, to make your own informed judgment.
Ultimately, the most sustainable long-term solution seems to be the one we saw with Marcus Elias and Sarah, building parallel, non-exploitative systems, the path of the decentralized model.
That emerging infrastructure operates on principles designed to be non-invasive and non-harmful, standing in direct opposition to the weaponized ad model. This means no dark patterns to hijack your time, no A/B testing headlines for optimal rage generation, no psychological manipulation engineered into the interface,
No selling user data.
no selling user data, and strictly avoiding foreign or corporate influence. The focus shifts entirely to authentic expression, genuine expertise, and intellectual depth.
So the ultimate goal isn't just to moderate the toxic content on the old platforms, but to build something entirely new, something where genuine culture and an informed citizenry can actually emerge organically.
Precisely. The goal is to build parallel structures where culture can emerge organically, serving citizens and readers as participants, rather than being manufactured and sold to consumers and data points. We're seeing real people reclaiming the tools of the internet to define what is interesting and important based on shared reality and intellectual depth, rather than having their attention sold to the highest, most polarizing bidder.
So we stand at a critical crossroads, and it's defined by these economic incentives. On one path, we continue to accept industrial-scale attention extraction, which profits off our anxiety and anger, driving polarization among political parties and damaging our civic health. This system treats our minds as commodities and our society as a target for both domestic manipulation and foreign warfare.
The alternative path is supporting the infrastructure of the decentralized renaissance. This is a deliberate, powerful rejection of that ad-driven incentive model. And the economic shift from ad revenue to the patronage model is the single most significant factor in this structural change. It directly aligns the creator's success, not with the click-through rate of rage-bait headline, but with the intellectual depth, integrity, and honesty of their long-form work.
We saw this with Marcus writing 10,000 words on grid storage because his audience was investing in knowledge, with Elias rebuilding peer-to-peer social trust through local fact-sharing, and with Sarah creating cultural immunity through authentic, hyper-local connection that bots simply cannot replicate.
This is how genuine culture is cultivated, outside of the monolithic, centralized, exploitative structures. We have to recognize that the tools of the internet, which are currently being weaponized for social control and exploitation, can be reclaimed for human flourishing. When media serves people, culture thrives. When media exploits people, society fractures. The choice of which structure we participate in is not merely a personal consumer decision. It is a foundational act of cultural cultivation and civic responsibility.